What would you do for love? Would you wait decades for the right person? Spend your entire fortune to save them? But what if they were already dead? In 1940, police discovered something in a respected doctor's home that would shock the nation. Something that challenged the very boundaries between love and madness. For 7 years, Dr. Carl Tanzler kept a secret. Every night, he would dress in his finest clothes, put on a record, and dance with his beloved Elena. The only problem? Elena had died 7 years earlier. This is not a ghost story. This is not fiction. This is the true tale of a man who decided that if he couldn't have love in life, he would preserve it in death. Born in Dresden, Germany in 1877, Carl Tanzler grew up in a world of mysticism and dark romance. From a young age, he was drawn to stories of love transcending death, tales of undying devotion, eternal bonds, and spirits who refused to let go. But Carl's fascination went beyond mere curiosity. As a child, he claimed to be visited by visions, a recurring dream of a dark-haired woman with piercing eyes and otherworldly presence. To Carl, this wasn't just a dream. It was a prophecy, a divine message meant only for him. He believed she was real, alive somewhere in the world, waiting for him, and he swore that one day he would find her. As he grew older, the vision never faded. If anything, it consumed him. Carl pored over medical texts, studying anatomy and preservation techniques, not out of professional interest, but because he feared what time might do to something so fragile, so precious. He told himself he was preparing for the day their paths would cross, for the moment when fate would bring her to him. But deep down, there was another fear gnawing at him. What if she came too late? What if illness or death took her before he could reach her? The thought terrified him, so he vowed to master not just medicine, but the secrets of eternity itself. He studied everything from Egyptian embalming practices to electrical experiments on dead tissue, all in pursuit of one goal, keeping her alive, no matter the cost. By 1926, Carl had made his way to Key West, Florida. He found work as a radiologist at the Marine Hospital, treating the local population. To his colleagues, he seemed eccentric but harmless. Little did they know that every day, Carl was waiting for the dark-haired woman from his childhood visions to appear. And then, in April 1930, she walked through his door. Her name was Elena de Hoyos, 21 years old, Cuban-American, and suffering from tuberculosis. The moment Carl saw her, he knew, or believed he knew, that this was the woman he had been waiting for his entire life. Elena was beautiful, yes, but already marked by illness. Her skin was pale, her breathing labored. Other doctors had given up hope. But Carl saw something else entirely. What followed was an obsessive campaign to save Elena's life. Carl spent thousands of dollars on experimental treatments. He created bizarre electrical machines, concocted strange medicines, and visited her home at all hours. To Elena's family, he must have seemed like a blessing at first, a dedicated physician willing to try anything to save their daughter. But there was something unsettling about his devotion. He brought Elena gifts: jewelry, clothing, perfume. He wrote her poetry. He spoke of taking her to Vienna, of marriage, of a future together. But Elena never returned his feelings. To her, he was simply her doctor, perhaps a friend, but nothing more. Despite Carl's increasingly desperate efforts, tuberculosis continued its relentless march. Elena grew weaker by the day. On July 25th, 1931, Elena de Hoyos died. She was just 22 years old. For most people, that would have been the end of the story. For Carl Tanzler, it was just the beginning. Carl paid for an elaborate funeral. He commissioned an expensive stone mausoleum, claiming it was to honor his patient's memory. But even as Elena's family mourned, Carl was making plans. Dark plans that would have horrified them anyone else had they known. Using his position at the hospital and his knowledge of chemistry, Carl began visiting Elena's mausoleum at night. He had studied ancient Egyptian embalming techniques, and now he put that knowledge to use. He treated Elena's body with preservatives and chemicals. But that was just the start of his grotesque project. When her skin began to decay, he replaced it with silk soaked in wax and plaster. When her eyes dulled, he crafted new ones from glass. When her hair fell out, he made a wig from her own fallen hair that he had collected during her illness. But visiting the cemetery wasn't enough for Carl. In April 1933, nearly 2 years after Elena's death, he made his most audacious move yet. Using a small wagon, under cover of darkness, he removed Elena's body from the mausoleum and took her to his home. What followed was 7 years of what Carl would later call the time of happiness. He dressed Elena's preserved body in wedding gowns. He placed it in his bed. He spoke to it, danced with it, sang to it. He even crafted a crude mask to cover the decomposing features of her face. To mask the inevitable smell of decay, he kept dozens of perfume bottles around the house. He used preservatives and disinfectants constantly. And all the while, he told himself that one day, his sleeping beauty would awaken. But the walls of his sanctuary were thin. Neighbors noticed the peculiar odors wafting from his windows. They whispered about the strange lights burning late into the night, about the silhouette of a woman who never moved. And then there were the stories of Dr. Tanzler talking to himself, of seeing him dance with what looked like a mannequin, of hearing music playing at odd hours. Each mishap, each slip-up brought him closer to exposure. Yet Carl refused to change his ways, because to him, these weren't signs of danger, they were proof that Elena was still with him. It was Elena's sister, Florinda, who finally decided enough was enough. The rumors had grown too loud to ignore. Too many people claimed to have seen or heard things they couldn't explain. When she gathered the courage to confront Carl herself, what she discovered left her speechless. The authorities arrived at Carl's house expecting to find nothing more than an eccentric old man living in squalor. What they found instead defied belief. There, in the center of the room, lay Elena's preserved body dressed in a wedding gown, surrounded by candles and flowers. Her face was partially obscured by a crude mask, but there was no mistaking who she was. Carl was arrested, but due to the statute of limitations having expired, he could not be charged with grave robbery. The case caused a sensation in Key West. Perhaps most disturbing of all was the public's reaction. Many people, particularly women, sympathized with Carl. They saw his actions as tragically romantic rather than criminal. In a final indignity, Elena's preserved body was put on public display at a local funeral home. Over 6,800 people came to view it before Elena's family was finally able to give her a proper burial in an unmarked grave. Carl Tanzler never expressed remorse. He wrote an autobiography defending his actions, claiming he had acted out of pure love. He spent his final years in Zephyrhills, Florida, where he created a life-sized effigy of Elena using her death mask. He died in 1952, found clutching this effigy. To this day, the story of Carl Tanzler serves as a chilling reminder of how obsession can masquerade as love, and how the line between devotion and desecration can blur in a disturbed mind. Somewhere in Key West Cemetery, Elena de Hoyos rests in an unmarked grave, finally at peace, finally beyond the reach of the man who refused to let her go.